Last year, before I had my driver's license, I would occasionally have to walk to and from school. Most days my mom would just take me, and it was much easier that way. Sometimes, though, she would work late and I'd have to walk back. The school was about a 20-minute walk from my house. It was a rather warm October day. I had gotten a ride to school in the morning as usual, but today was one of those days that I would have to walk home. I usually didn't mind the walk though. I would just put in my earphones and enjoy the fresh air. Plus, this time of year, the trees were all starting to change color, so that made for a little more of a visual stimulus. I was about halfway home on my walk, and this particular area of my walking path has no sidewalk. Also, the road is basically surrounded by forest. I do kind of live in a rural area after all. I had my headphones in, focusing on the blaring music coming through them. Over that, though, I heard something. It was such an odd noise. I took my headphones out, and the noise was much clearer now. It was coming from behind me. I turned around and there was no one, but the noise persisted. It was coming from just to the right inside the woods. I couldn't imagine what it could have been. I kept walking, no headphones in though, just listening. The noise stopped for a few minutes. By this point, I was almost onto the street that my house was on. Just before I made it to the intersection of the roads, I heard the odd noise again. Once again, it was coming from behind me not too far away. I turned around again, and this time saw something. There was someone dressed as a clown, now standing on the side of the road right where I just walked by. Suddenly it clicked, and I realized what the sound I was hearing was. It was the sound that a clown nose makes when it's squeezed. The clown was about 40 feet away, but he was walking toward me at a steady pace. I think I was frozen in shock, because I didn't move as he was gaining quickly. When he was about 20 to 25 feet away, I figured that was a good time to run as fast as I could in the direction of my house. I ran all the way back, not missing a step. I snuck into my backyard and unlocked the back door with the spare key. I took a couple minutes to catch my breath, wondering if that actually had just happened. I locked all the doors and windows just in case. I didn't think I was followed though. I decided against telling my mom about it once she came home from work. This doesn't end here though. That same night, I was in bed trying to fall asleep, and I heard the familiar squeaking noise again. I actually almost threw up when I heard it. I just stayed perfectly still, pretending to be asleep, hoping it would eventually stop, and it finally did. I only had to make that walk one more time before I was able to get my driver's license and just drive myself to school. It does concern me a little bit that the clown knows where I live. It's been over a year now though. I'm just hoping I never see him, or any other clowns for that matter, again. Back in 2016, when the clown sighting seemed to be at its peak, I actually had an encounter with one. I remember seeing on the news a lot them talking about locations where clowns had been spotted. I never really paid it much attention though, because I'll never be in that situation, right? Well, I was wrong. My house is pretty close to a park. It's basically within visual sight of my house. There's a bunch of baseball fields and football fields where basically anyone from the community could come and hang out. There was also a pool that was open in the summertime. I spent a lot of time there, whether it was by myself, running, or out with my kids. My oldest son, Jake, plays baseball. Since the park was walking distance and there was plenty of baseball fields over there, I could go over there and throw a ball with him pretty much whenever we felt like it. This was one of those days. It was good father-son bonding time, and we both enjoyed it. It was kind of chilly out this day, not too many people around. A couple joggers here and there, but For the most part, we had the place to ourselves. A bit unusual, especially for a Saturday. Jake and I were throwing ball on the field. At one point, he signaled to stop and ran up to where I was standing. I asked him what was wrong, and he pointed behind me toward a little shed that has a couple bathrooms in it. He said he thought he saw someone behind it, and that it kind of looked like a clown. I believed him that he saw someone. I wasn't so sure about the clown part, though. I know he's seen the news reports about it, and I was sure the kids were talking about it at school. My initial thought was that he was just seeing things, although I have to admit, what he said kinda did freak me out. I told him we should get a few more throws in and we would head back. A couple minutes later, Jake pointed behind me again. I looked back and saw what he was talking about. You could just barely see a white glove sticking out, as well as fuzzy red hair behind the shed. That's all you could see, though. It was a weird sight, to say the least. I motioned for Jake to follow me as we started walking off the field and back in the direction of the house. I made sure we avoided walking anywhere near that shed. Anyways, we got out of the park and back up on the street my house is on. It was within visual sight by now. I didn't even want to look back in fear of seeing the clown, or even worse, to see him following us. Even though I wasn't looking back, Jake was, about every 10 seconds for that matter. He looked back one more time when we were walking and said, "Look." I turned around, nervous, and I saw the clown. Full body this time, right by the entrance to the park. He was standing there, smiling and waving at us. We were basically home at this point, and I was just ready to get us inside and into safety. Once home, I kept a lookout just to make sure he hadn't followed us to our house. I even went downstairs to the safe and pulled out one of my handguns just in case. We never saw him or another clown again during the whole sighting situation. Looking back, it was probably just some kid trying to have fun and scare people or whatever. You heard a lot of stories of clowns doing really messed up stuff back then, though. You kinda don't have time to ponder whether it's a joke or not, when you and your child's life could potentially be in danger. I've always had an intense fear of clowns. No matter how silly they look sometimes, I've always found them super scary. Even at 22 years old, that fear is still very much there. One Friday night, not too long ago, I was out at the bar with some friends. Going out was something we commonly did on the weekends. I have been to this specific bar multiple times. The only issue was a lot of times we would drive to save money on Uber. The problem is, there's very little parking near the bar, especially on weekends when it's crowded. This means we commonly have to park 3 or 4 blocks away and walk. It's usually not a problem, but this will be important later in the story. I was with 4 of my friends, and the plan was to just have a good time like we always did. As the night went on, a couple of my friends went off with various girls. That was pretty normal. It was about 2 a.m. at this point, and there was only me and one other friend still there. We decided it was about time to start heading out. By this point, I was pretty drunk. My other friend had drove, and he was sober enough to drive us back, where I would just stay the night at his place. We exited the bar and began walking back to where we had parked. We usually parked generally in the same spot every time. We have made that walk so many times that we even knew a couple shortcuts that could cut the walk down by a couple minutes. The only thing was, you had to cut through a couple alleys behind various businesses. The lighting back there was poor, to say the least. But again, we have made that walk so many times, we never thought twice about it. We made the turn down into one of the alleys, and immediately there was someone dressed as a clown leaning up against the wall. He was maybe 10 feet in front of us. Both my friend and I stopped for a second and looked at him. He noticed us and looked back, but said nothing. It was weird, but considering I was still drunk, I kinda thought it was funny. My friend pushed me along, and we walked right past the clown into the alley. He didn't move as we walked right in front of us. I was kind of laughing about it and making jokes, and I could tell my friend was getting annoyed and just wanted to get back to the car. I heard footsteps on the pavement all of a sudden. Both my friend and I turned our heads around and saw the clown from before charging at us. I sobered up almost instantly, and that fear of clowns I've had all my life consumed me. I could hear him behind us as we ran. It sounded like he was gaining on us. I could even hear him make this high-pitched cackling laugh, which only added to the fear. We made it back onto the main road, and I couldn't hear the footsteps anymore, but we took no chances and kept running all the way back to the car. We made it back safely and drove home. Like I said, this sobered me up super quick, and honestly, my fear of clowns has just gotten even worse since then. We still go to that bar sometimes, but usually we are taking Uber or having someone pick us up. I never want to go down that alley again. Number 1, for fear of seeing that clown again, and 2, just having to relive that moment, having him charging at us, making that creepy, cackling laugh.